We made it though. That's why I wear flip-flops even on Easter Sunday. As you guys are here, turn to Hebrews chapter 12. We're going to get there in a minute, and you may go, Hebrews? How's Hebrews an Easter message? Well, you're going to find out here in a second. I love the opportunity for Easter Sunday because to me it's a challenge not only to find something new, but to really motivate those who have been in the faith for a long time, or maybe even those who haven't been here for years. And in that process go, man, how do I connect better to what God has for me? So that's the hope of really the message today as we look forward to what Christ has for us. And we're going to talk about expectations. We've been talking about that for a while, the last couple weeks at least, about how expectations set our beliefs and our path and our direction and all those kind of things. And if I can, I don't want to, let me do it this way. I'm going to give a praise to God that the internet worked at all today, because last week it didn't. Josh and I went through it, Josh more than I, this week to try and get it figured out. It's still not working, but by God's grace and a hot spot, it worked well enough for us to get here. And I thought, my expectation is on Easter, everything runs smoothly and you hope just to do well. And I knew last week when the internet didn't work, I even said, man, I'm glad it's not Easter, because we didn't do any music at all. It let me preach for an hour and 4 minutes though, so I loved it. But I thought we were going to get this week to test one of the statements I made years ago. I was a pastor of a church in Texas, and another church disbanded, and it's a long story. I'm going to tell you the very short version. And they gave us all their building, content, property, blah, blah, blah. And it was about 30 minutes away from us. And so we were in the process of trying to figure out what to do with that. Well, in that process, the entire education wing, a pipe froze, busted, flooded the entire education wing of that building. So it'd be like our entire downstairs flooding with 6 feet of water. The water guy came to test just to read the meter and literally saw water flowing out from the doors. That's what was, and nobody was there because nobody was meeting there anymore. And when we came to the context of that, and I turned it into insurance said, well, we don't have to cover that. I said, why not? They said, because the building's abandoned. I said, the building was not abandoned. We've gone in periodically and checked on it and made sure everything's fine. This just happened. Well, the building was abandoned, and it was the first and probably really the last time that I read an insurance policy, page 1 all the way through page 70 or whatever it was. And sure enough, in that insurance policy, you know what it said abandon was? That you did not have on site that which was necessary to conduct business. And I called my insurance company back and I said, well, I'm the one who's going to change your policy. And they said, what? I said, all I need to conduct business is a Bible. And there are plenty of those still on site. Now, there were still cribs and pews and blah, blah, blah. But I said, all I needed was a Bible. So last week tested that. And I'm thrilled this week's not testing that again. But really, sometimes we need to simplify some things. Sometimes we need to get away from the trappings of, let's say for Easter eggs or Easter bunny. It's confusing sometimes. Although we're going to have a great Easter egg hunt after this for the children to run around and grab some things. But sometimes I think we make things more difficult than they have to be. So today I'm going to try and hopefully keep this very simple and very plain as we look at Hebrews chapter 12. But can I start with this? Just a simple statement. If you're a note taker, this may be one to ponder on, or maybe you've just known this for years and I'm just the one who's going to put it in a sentence. Life always comes from death or dormancy. We often think that everything that lives is going to die, and that's the direction we go. But we need to realize that everything that's alive came from either death or dormancy. Let me give you some examples. Dying to yourself is the beginning of living for Christ. I mean, that's what Christ calls us to do. He says, if you want to follow me, you must deny yourself. Take up your cross daily and follow me. That's what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. That's what it means to be. Don't make it more complicated than that, because it really is that simple. Dying to self is the beginning of life in Christ. Death of a dream will bring new opportunities, right? Think about your life. You had that thing you were holding on to and that hope that you had, and maybe it was for a spouse, or maybe it was for a child, or maybe it was for a career or a job. and it just didn't work out like you thought it was going to. Your expectations were crushed and your dreams were crushed. But when you finally understood that, an opportunity opened to you that you hadn't even been looking for. An opportunity comes around that you go, wait, maybe this is it. And I was even talking to some teenagers this week and thinking through some, things they're going to go through, that because one thing changes, it doesn't mean everything is done. It just means another opportunity is going to come. And when you've lived long enough, you can look back and go, oh wait, if that hadn't happened, if that girl hadn't said no, I wouldn't be with this wonderful lady here. If that, boss hadn't said you're fired, I would have never branched out and started my own business. So the death even of a dream brings the potential and possibility of new opportunities. Christ even said it this way: seeds must die in order to multiply fruit. And that was an example he gave for himself. He said, I must die in order to multiply. It has to happen. There is no other way. I'm going to have to die in order for you to receive the Spirit you're to receive, in order for you to do the things that God has called us to do. We must do it together. So a seed must die to even bear fruit or to flower. Now what about dormancy? I was thinking right now, it's real easy to look at dormancy. Out of what looks like death comes life. If somebody didn't know and they came to my backyard, they'd think every tree in my backyard was dead because they're cottonwoods. And right now they look dead. Bark's peeling off, there's no leaves, there's no nothing. But in about a month, they're going to be dropping all this cotton and all these leaves and all that. And God bless them, they're going to come back to life. And it's not that they're dead, they've just been dormant. So have my allergies in the process. They're going to come back to life. So are my daughters. That's just going to be what happens out of that process. But so does the grass. I came from Texas. I said, Texas is just always looks kind of dead. You have about 3 months out of the year where it feels like Texas is alive. And everything's green in the spring, and the flowers are budding, and blah, blah, blah. Then the other 9, it's just kind of burned up, brown, and dead. But it's not. It's just dormant. It's just waiting for the opportunity again to grow. It's just waiting for an opportunity to spring forth as something new and be renewed. So life comes from death. Even a child comes from a dormant egg and a dormant seed. It just does. So today, you come with expectations. I don't know what they are. You do. God does. And he wants to meet those, but he's going to meet them in his way and probably not the way you expected it. Because if you look at the people in the gospel story of the resurrection, I don't think a one of them got what they expected at all. And really, chaos is kind of the feeling of the day for when Christ died and when he goes to a cross, and especially when he goes to the grave, and they just go, what just happened? What just happened to our dream? What just happened to our plans? What just happened to our teacher, our master, our Savior? What does this mean? And he lets them, and I think it's so incredible, he lets them on a Sabbath day, a day of worship, a day set aside for the Lord, dwell on that. He lets them just sit for an entire day and try and figure out, what does this mean? Because, man, our expectations just got crushed. Peter expected to stand up and fight, and Jesus told him no, and he ran away instead and denied. John expected to keep his clothes on, but when he ran, do you know this story? They rip him off and he runs away naked. That was not what John expected, I can promise you. But if you look even at the women in the story, it's so interesting because the women are so prevalent in the story of the resurrection. They had left things undone that they expected to get done on the morning of resurrection. Bringing spices. Christ's body had been buried without this proper burial sequence, and spices added. He was literally just wrapped in a cloth and put in the tomb because it was the day of preparation before the Sabbath, and the sun was going down, and the Sabbath would start when the sun went down, and they had to rush and hurry to get him in a grave, and so they weren't even able to prepare his body. And they were expecting on this new day to go in and finish what had been undone. So they brought spices. They expected they were going to need to roll away a stone. Little did they know that was going to already be done for them when they got there. They had expected to have to deal with soldiers who were not going to listen to them or care at all what they had to say about what they needed to do that day to finish what they weren't able to finish before, because the tomb had been sealed. Now it was guarded. And the soldiers were not going to go, oh, sure, let's just break that seal. We'll open that up, and we'll let you in, do what you need to do, and we'll roll this stone back. You know why they wouldn't do that? Because whoever broke the seal was open to the penalty of death for breaking the seal that had been established. Even the soldiers. That's why the seal was there. If you break it, we have the right to kill you for that in this process. And so that's just the women. I thought through the expectations of the soldiers. You know, they didn't really expect a lot. They were covering the dead guy, right? I mean, what's there? Oh, this is the easiest duty we pulled all week long. We'll sit here for the weekend. We'll hang out by a campfire, do whatever, because this guy's not going anywhere. Their expectations didn't get fulfilled very well either, did they? They literally, at one point, it says, were like dead men when Christ rose from the grave. And Ken in Sunday school goes, that just means they passed out. And I think there's a lot of truth to that the shock was so great they just fainted in the process. Their expectations were not met. The expectations of the Pharisees are one of the ones that surprised me. Because the Pharisees had a lot of expectations. You know what? They did the most work of anybody in this story when Christ passed away. Do you know, and I'm going to be honest with you, as a pastor who's been to seminary and been doing this for 20 years, I had missed this fact. Do you know that everything they do on the Sabbath? When they're not supposed to? They were expected to lead Israel and to rest. But instead, they go to Pilate. Instead, they say, hey, listen, we need you to post a guard. Instead, they say, hey, we need you to seal this tomb as best you can and put a mark on it so that nobody opens it. And they come in, and they are the only ones who seem to expect Christ to do something. Or maybe his disciples on their behalf. But they expect and place a stone, a guard, a seal. And again, to break the seal is penalty of death. But it's going to be broken by a dead guy. Think about that in their expectation. Does that make sense? The dead guy is the one who breaks the seal. So therefore, what do you do with him? The expectations of the disciples. Man, they come in and their expectation is, we're next. We're next. So they're just hiding. They're behind locked doors. They are gathered together trying to figure out what has just happened. And again, it's the women that go out. The disciples still stay exactly where they are. The disciples, if you look at this, and we'll look at it in a minute, don't even know where the tomb is. Only the women do, because they went with Joseph of Arimathea. And they went with Nicodemus when they placed him in the tomb. The disciples weren't even there. They really weren't even at the cross. Only John was for a little bit, because we know Jesus addresses him and says, hey, John, take care of my mother. But even at the end of this, the women are backed all the way up and at a distance watching what's going on. And so, man, expectations. If you're not willing to let God rock your expectations a little bit, you will never follow him where he needs you to go. Okay, that's the sermon in a nutshell. Now let's get to Scripture and look at that. Look at Hebrews 12. We're just going to pull out a few verses in this, and I'm actually going to kind of start in the middle. I love verse 1, but we're going to skip that, let you read on your own. We're going to start with verse 2. And it simply says this, and we're just going to break it down. Let us, that's us, okay? That's us. That's the followers of Christ, the disciples. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus. Now I want to stick there for a second before we go any farther. Fix your eyes on Jesus. I don't know what that means to you. I don't know what your expectation is. I think that means pay attention as you're going through life. I think that means coming and asking God, what do I do in this situation and circumstance? Even when this situation and circumstance aren't that big a deal to me. It's real easy to ask God what to do with a life change or a job change or a move or a marriage. But what about, do I make this phone call? What about, do I help this guy that I see in need on the side of the road or in the store? Or do I just say a kind word and I show patience and love to somebody? Do you fix your eyes on Jesus in that time, or you just do what you want to do? and walk on. And I'm constantly challenged by that. When I make a choice, did I even ask Christ what he would have me do before I just made a decision? Because I want to fix my eyes on Jesus. And as we look at that even in the crucifixion, okay, and this story you can read in each gospel. They're all a little different because they're from a different perspective and different point of view. But in every one it says the women at the crucifixion when Christ was at his end and it was finished were at a distance. Now I want to try and see these scenes in my mind. I want to try and understand them because most movies I don't think do a very good job. They sterilize Christ way too much to make him personal. And I'd much more personally be involved and see what this is like. But I wonder, did the pain become too much of watching him die? Did the jeering of the crowd and the Roman soldiers mocking him and making fun of him and teasing him, and did it become too much? What was it that had them back up and become more and more distant as the day went on? But I want you to see that even at a distance, they were there. And what were they doing? They were watching. They were observing. They were trying to understand. They couldn't bring themselves to leave or to abandon. So they stayed. And they fixed their eyes on Jesus. Now I want you to know that if they hadn't,